Hello, this is David Gilmore, known as LDS Prepper, and you may or may not know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is very, very interested in having emergency communications and has tasked actually wards or congregations, stakes, and areas to have emergency communications available when cell phone towers are not working and when the grid is down. I'm very pleased to be able to share with you this training that we had here at the Bishop Storehouse Emergency Radio Communications Group from Elder Dave Carleton, who has over 25 years of experience and is called as a service missionary in the Northwest region of the United States, covering 11 coordinating councils, 100 stakes, 900 wards, over 350,000 members of the church, and helping them get their emergency communications set up. With so many different radios available, he doesn't cover any information about radios or make recommendations. However, I do. And if you go to ldsprepper.com and click on playlists, and then click on the Family Emergency Radio Communications playlist, you'll be able to see all these different videos where I've tested many different brands and models and told you which ones to stay away from, which ones I would recommend, and which ones could literally save your life in an emergency. When the grid is down, cell towers are down, and you need to get help or you need to get hold of family and loved ones. So please take a look at the video resources I have here after you watch this presentation from Elder Dave Carleton.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We're at 134 right now. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special training this evening. Before I give some additional instruction, let me go ahead and we'll have Steve Galbraith, KB7ITU, give us an opening prayer.
Our kind and loving Father in heaven, we're so thankful to be able to come together as a concerned group with the emergency communications groups, and we're so thankful, Father, for Thy presence in our life, and we ask Thee, Father, that Thy might provide us with a portion of Thy Spirit this evening as we concentrate on the things that are important to Thee and important to the people that provide emergency communications, both ERC and other organizations as well. We're thankful, Father, for Brother Carlson and the opportunity that we have to have him train us and help us along with the communications that he has set up. Father, we thank Thee for the many blessings that Thou has given us. We thank Thee for the moisture that we've received this year. We thank Thee for the wonderful day that we have had. Father, we do these things in the blessed name of Thy loving Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. Okay, this is the stake specialist training that's on April 10th. And those that are stake specialists that have their, we call the stake specialists or their assistants will be getting more information on that. And there's the GroupMe QR code if you don't have it. But if you're not currently a member of the GroupMe group, we encourage you to do that. That's how you get immediate notifications, as long as text messaging and the internet pieces that support that are up. It is used to kind of get the information out. So it's just one of the ways that we use to kind of alert people if there's a need to. There are certain circumstances, severe weather, for example, that we will also send things out, but it's used very sparingly, and other than a test once a month, unless we forget the test like this month. But typically on the first day of the month, we do a test. Other than that, it's quiet. And again, it's only a one way. That's why we call it ERC announce. It's for announcements only. And there's no way that people can come back, even though there's multiple hundred people on the group. We don't have to worry about that chit chat back and forth. So if you're worried about that, you don't have to worry. And then there's our spring exercise. So we have a very special guest with this this evening. We have Elder Dave Carleton. He is the North America Northwest ERC coordinator. He has been involved with the ERC program for over 25 years. So he's officially an old timer. Oh, look at the shirt you're wearing. I never noticed that.
Isn't that here you go. Look at that.
Oh, wow. I just barely noticed that. So,
I did it just to impress you, Kevin.
well, you did. I can't stop laughing here. I love it. Okay. So Dave, Elder Carleton, I should maybe say, he works and coordinates 11 coordinating councils in Washington. That includes over 100 stakes, 900 wards in Washington, Oregon, and Northern Idaho. Altogether, they support over 350,000 members of the church. So he is a longtime amateur radio operator. He is also a licensed GMRS operator. And I'll let Dave tell you a little bit more, but I'll go ahead and pause. And just one more reminder before we start. If you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat, and then at the appropriate time, we'll pass those along to Dave. So with that, I'll be quiet and turn things over to you, Elder Carl.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So let me just start this out with, I guess I can't say I've been doing this too long because there's plenty around here that have been doing it for longer than I have. I've been here locally in Spokane for about 10 years now. And before that, I was in Las Vegas for 30 plus, pretty much doing the same thing down there. And when I came up here 10 years ago, the program at that point, and we'll get into this later on in my presentation, but the program at that point, when I originally got called here 9 years ago, a really good week for us for check-ins from the, what was I at the time? 10 stakes, we're now at 14, was 100 total. We're now up to we average about 2,000 a week, of which roughly 12 to 1,300 of that is FRS and GMRS. And my presentation tonight, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing here. My presentation tonight is kind of how we do that. Okay, so I'm just, as Kevin said, I'm just going to go through this. There is some time at the end for questions. So hopefully I've got it in somewhat of an order you'll kind of understand. So try to hold, I guess, most of your questions till the end, and then we'll get them. If it's something really, the world's going to stop turning if we don't answer it, then let me know. But we'll leave it at that for now. So this is kind of the same thing Kevin just talked about. I'm also one of the AECs for the Spokane County Aries Group and ACS. We have Oxcom up here, and so I'm one of the assistant coordinators for that as well. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you might mention what you do for a living as well. It might be interesting.
Oh, yeah. So I'm actually a church employee as well. I am the temple facility manager here for the Spokane Temple. So I keep it running in my spare time. But yeah, I've been doing that. I started with the church back in 1987 at the Logan Temple, and I'm currently on my 4th temple. And if all goes well, I'll be moving to my 5th one here by the end of the year, when they announce groundbreaking for the new Coeur d'Alene temple that they just announced in October. So we'll see how that all works out, but that's the plan at this point in the game. So that's what I do. So luckily I have a very forgiving employer when it comes to my mission stuff. To give you an idea, so when I first got up here, I was actually a calling. So I was the Spokane Coordinating Council Emergency Communications Specialist. That eventually got turned into a mission. And I have just been extended one more time. So I'm about almost 10 years into my 18-month service mission. So just to give you an idea, if they call you to that, just hang on because you're not going anywhere anytime soon. So I like to have fun with these things. This is a little cartoon I caught hold of several years ago. I think it has an application for everything we do, because I think even as radio operators, we can kind of get stuck in a rut and think that we got it all figured out. And we always have to be testing our equipment, making sure everything works, making sure we still work. We still know how it all goes. You know, if we haven't used a mode in a while, And I think this is just a fun little cartoon to help us remember to not only check our stuff at home and food and all that kind of stuff, but also make sure we check our stuff when it comes to radio. So what we are here tonight to talk about specifically is GMRS FRS. I do have 2 slides on amateur radio, but we are not going to be talking about that tonight. We're going to be specific to FRS, GMRS, and kind of what we do here in Spokane, how we've got the program set up and how we kind of operate what we do here. My first question for everybody is, why are we here? What is the point of what we do? And I want you to kind of think about that. Everybody's kind of got their own reasons for why they do it, but I want you to really think about why we do what we do. So I have a theme this year, and it's called Feed the Horses. And it entails the story of Ammon. If everybody knows the story of Ammon, we all know that Ammon, went on his mission, got to be good friends with the king, and the king wanted him to marry his daughter. He said, nope, I just want to be one of your servants. And then Ammon went out into the fields and did what Ammon did. And when they came to shoo away all the king's flocks, he kind of took care of that little situation. And as the story goes, those that were with him picked up all the body parts, put them in a cart, and took them back, and were explaining to the king what had happened and what Ammon had done. And if you remember in the story, one of the things the king was really interested in knowing about was, where was Ammon? What was he doing? All the rest of the guys were there explaining it. And they made a nice, simple explanation. They said, Ammon is feeding the horses. And they had been told prior to going out to do this, that when they got back to go feed the horses and get them ready for a journey they were going to be taking. And so Ammon just went about doing what Ammon was told to do. And I would submit to you that we have been told, we have been given instruction for, since 1936 as a church, and especially if you're ERC operators, we've been given all of our direction and what we need to be doing and how we need to be setting things up and getting communication for our stakes and our wards and our people and the communities and all those things. And that's our feeding the horses. And so this presentation is kind of one of those ways that we can feed the horses. And so, like I said, that's kind of my theme for our group up here this year in the whole area that I cover. And it's kind of fun to go through and find every month we do meetings and find the things that we can do to help feed the horses. So let's get this part out of the way. These are my couple of slides on amateur radio. For the amateur radio operators, die hard. This is a true statement. And I will say up front, you are not going to run a quality and well-run emergency communications program without amateur radio. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, thinking that you're going to get all of your families and leadership and everybody else to go out and get amateur radio licenses is also not going to happen. And so we have to figure out a way to bridge that. And for us, FRS and GMRS has been the key to bridging that little gap. I bring this little slide up. I'm not going to ask people to unmute, but I use this a lot in my training. Some of you may have seen it before. I want to give you an idea that this is not an AT&T cellular map. This is a map of amateur radio operators in the United States. This is as of 10 years ago. I have not been able to find this map anywhere since, but this is the operators we had 10 years ago, and every year for the last 10 years, we've set new records for guys that have gotten, and females that have gotten their amateur radio licenses. So for amateur radio to get around the community and to get around the country, we can accomplish that task. And to me, that's the easy part of our calling. The really hard part is to get around our ward. To me, that's where we need the information coming from to help us do what we need to do. So I bring these up because we all know if you're an amateur operator, we have the ways of getting communication out of the affected areas and be able to coordinate some things, but it's within the affected areas and especially down to the folks in our wards and in their individual homes that we need to be working toward. And so why GMRS FRS? I want you to think about this picture. This is one that was sent to me years ago with completely something else, and I've used it for many times since. And the initial, I always ask people when I train is what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you see this picture? And most people, and I was the same way, is what an idiot of a neighbor, the guy that cleaned his side but didn't clean the other side. And that may be what the picture's about, but I think there's several things. The other one that I want to bring up is, what if that neighbor with the snow still on their stoop has been such a pain to this poor neighbor every time he tries to help and clean this off that he finally gave up, or they've done all kinds of things to get him to stop because they don't want the help and they don't think they need it. And they look at it as charity and all those other things that we think about. And I would ask all of you to not be one of these, as in the one that's a pain. The one that's more than willing to go and shovel it off, please be. But we have plenty of people within the church, and especially within our communities, that can tend to be a little bit of a pain when it comes to providing assistance for them, and let's not be one of those. In times of incidents, we need as much help as we can get, and we need people that are willing to play with the rest of us. And so let's not be one of these. Also, things can get messy for those that have participated in incidents. I'm going to show you a couple of videos here real quick.
Yes, it is.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help! 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 Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, it's not enough left to do. That's it.
Okay, so I am going to ask people to unmute. What's the point of this video?
They're waiting for help when they could have helped themselves to walking up the escalator?
Yeah, they could have gone actually either way, up or down.
I think it's about society can be overwhelmed with learned helplessness.
Okay.
We've become
Don't wait for someone to help you.
We've become so dependent upon technology that we've lost the skills and ability to do.
Okay.
Don't overlook the obvious.
Just in general, we're too dependent on others and things.
Can it be paused?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's one as well. So you have to understand there are going to be people during an incident that are going to do this. It's the proverbial elephant. How do you eat an elephant? And we all know it's one bite at a time. But there are some folks that just can't get that in their head. And so when things become overwhelming to them, they just simply shut down and won't do anything. And so we are going to have these types of people in incidents. And I will tell you from experience, some of them will be the very people you would have never guessed would have been one of those people. So we always, and it doesn't really matter why they are the way they are. The simple fact is they are. And we have to figure out a way that we can still help them and get whatever we can to them and get them taken care of. So we always have to look for these folks. The other one, hold on, let me get to this one. This one's even funner though. And this is truly what an incident's going to be like.
Man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Okay, so that one is very a very good perspective of what an incident's really going to be like. And I don't care how big or small it is. It's just the degree of cat herding you're doing. But it turns into that fairly quickly. So let's talk about why we do GMRS and FRS.
This man right.
This is just kind of a short list of why we do it. The radio and equipment are very readily available. It's not very expensive. FRS and GMRS radios are all over the place anymore. If you go down and buy the bubble pack ones at like Walmart or Target or any of those kinds of places, they're already programmed with the frequencies in them. They're channelized 1 through 22. You can't mess with them. You can't do anything with them except for the ones that do repeaters. You can put a tone in them, but that's about it. And so they're easy FC licenses for GMRS. Again, they're fairly simple. You get on now. I say fairly simple right up to the point of when you have to get on the FCC webpage to do it, because that's probably the most difficult part about it. But unlike an amateur license, you don't have to take a test. You just give them your $35 on the FCC webpage. They send you a call sign and you're good to go for 10 years. And it covers your whole extended family. Unlike an amateur license, that amateur license is yours. A GMRS license will take care of your extended family, and that's anywhere in the United States, including U.S. territories. And so it's a really nice system for getting short-range communications, which is what we need on a ward level, in the hands of people. Now, why are we looking to do that? The main thing in an incident is you want to shelter in place until you can't shelter in place any longer. And so we don't want people outside. We don't want you becoming part of the incident if you don't need to be. And that includes being able to go through your ward and being able to find out how people are doing. And if you have to get in a car or on a bicycle or ride a skateboard or whatever it is to go around your community, you are now putting yourself in the potential of becoming part of the incident. So the more people we can get radios in their hands where they can contact their ward and stake folks and their zone captains, which we'll talk about that in a minute, the easier it is for all of this information to get passed, collected, and taken care of so we can get help to folks as fast as we can. If you don't know GMRS and FRS, there's 22 channels, 22 frequencies that the FCC has set aside, and these are the frequencies that are already programmed in radios. Can't do anything about it. I just realized. Oh no, I don't. So with an FCC license, GMRS license, you'll notice up on this side you can go up to 5 watts on these channels. And down here, you can go to 50 watts with the license. Everything else, you're at 2 watts or half a watt. And I forgot to change these. I'm sorry, but these right here are actually 2 watts minimum or maximum power without a license. These are half a watt no matter what you do. And so even though on FRS, we don't get a lot of range out of them, given the way that we set our stuff up here in Spokane, and I'm sure others do the same thing, we don't need a lot of range. We just need folks to be able to contact other folks in their ward boundaries. And obviously if you have a rural ward, that's going to change as well. But the GMRS side of this can take care of that problem as well. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is the repeater pairs for GMRS repeaters. Again, already set up. This is FCC stuff. We can't change these. These are the frequencies that have been allocated for GMRS repeater pairs. If you don't know about repeaters, to use a repeater, you have to have two frequency, an input and an output. And these frequencies are already set up by the FCC. About the only thing you can change on these is the tones that are required to get in and out of those repeaters. And the vast majority of GMRS repeater owners do what is called tone squelch, where they have a tone for both in and out. For those that I don't know what we've got on here, but there may be some folks here that don't know radio that well. But the tone that I'm talking about is your radio will put out what's called a subaudible tone. The repeater will hear that tone, and that's what will allow you the opportunity to function on a repeater. This is a huge tool for the kind of communications we're trying to do within a ward and a stake boundary, and it really helps things a lot. I can tell you when I first got here to Spokane, there were none. I set my first one up when I was here about 6 months. I found a nice repeater site, was able to get a repeater up. Since I did that back in 2016, we now have 21 repeaters that kind of cover this whole part of the panhandle of Idaho and over into Washington, the eastern part of Washington. So my area, just to give you an idea, just for the Spokane Coordinating Council, I cover all the way down to Grangeville, Idaho to the south, up into Canada to the north, all the way over to Libby, Montana to my east, and just past over kind of toward a straight line north from the Tri-Cities of Washington. And so it's a huge area. Like I said, we've got 14 stakes that cover that area. And so of that 14, 9 of those are within what I would consider the panhandle of Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden, and Spokane, and all of its suburbs proper. And the rest of them are down in Lewiston and Moscow, Pullman, Washington, up in Sandpoint, Idaho. And then when we have that's up in Colville, Washington, both the Colville, Washington, and the Sandpoint, Idaho stakes actually cover units that are up in Canada as well. So we cover all those wonderful areas. So those are all those. We're not going to get too much into radios tonight. That can be a fun little conversation, and that's a whole meeting unto itself. Just be aware that you can get radios from all over the place anymore that'll do GMRS, FRS. Some of them are specific to FRS, GMRS. Others are what we call an open radio, and let you kind of do FRS, GMRS, amateur bands, and a few other assorted ones. Just be careful when you're getting a GMRS, FRS radio, and make sure that it will, if you're going to have a GMRS license, that it will operate repeaters. Make sure it says on whatever you're getting that it will, in fact, allow you to operate repeaters. There are GMRS, FRS radios out there that do not. And so they're not going to do a whole lot of good for you. Same thing when it comes to a mobile base, which we're going to talk about a little bit about those in here in a minute. But mobile bases, same thing. There's a couple of different companies out there now. Midland makes one that's specific to FRS GMRS. It does do repeaters. The only thing I'm not a big fan of this radio is that it will only allow you to set up one repeater per channel at a time. So if you have multiple repeaters on the same channel with different tones, you actually have to go in and change the tone on the radio to be able to communicate with those other repeaters. Some of these commercial ones, you can do everything. And I will tell you, some of the commercial ones, older ones from ICOM, Kenwood, some of those have actually been grandfathered in after they made a bunch of the changes to the FRS and GMRS stuff a few years ago. These radios were actually grandfathered in and are still Part 95 compliant, which is what the FCC considers FRS and GMRS. So if you look around, you can find them. and they make life much easier because you can program multiple repeaters in them. Okay. And mobile bases are wonderful things, especially in rural wards and stakes, because obviously you can get out much more wattage, bigger antennas, all those fun things, and be able to cover a much wider area. This is one of my repeater sites here in Spokane. This just looks right off. This is on a 2,800 foot hill here in Spokane, and looks right down into the valley and covers pretty much everything in Spokane all the way through the panhandle of Idaho. So really good coverage on it. This is the antenna right here, and it does a nice job. This is the repeater itself, just for folks that have never seen them, kind of what a repeater is. It's just another radio basically with a few more extra parts to it, but it gets the job done, and it's been up and running almost 10 years now and does a very nice job for us here in Spokane. Okay, so let's talk about how we train here in the Spokane and what we do here in the Spokane Coordinating Council. So here's the information needed. This is from Salt Lake. This is the information that they kind of need to know. This is off of the providentliving.org website, if you've never been there. On providentliving.org, there's a page. If you look on the left-hand side of that screen, it'll show you a link there for emergency preparedness, and this is all part of that. So the 5 questions that we need to be able to answer, and these 5 questions, the goal is to have these answered within 3 hours of an incident. So they are: how are the full-time missionaries doing? How's our church and the community doing, our church members? How are our church buildings? So can they be used for distribution centers? If we need to use them for shelters, can they be used for that? I would advise you, do not go into a damaged building. If it looks damaged from the outside, stay out. If it looks like it's in decent shape, go in and be able to note whether we can use that building or not, if it's usable. Same with the community. What's the overall effects? Kind of what happened, what's going on, how's the infrastructure, those kinds of things, and then the anticipated needs. So those are the 5 questions that Salt Lake and leadership, even in your local area, are going to need kind of answered fairly quick so that they can start kind of formulating what is going to be needed. Okay? This is our goal here in Spokane, is to provide the right information to the right people at the right time so they can make the right decisions. We are communications guys. We are not decision makers. We don't, unless you're called specifically, we don't hold the keys to that stuff. That's for Bishop stake presence in Area 70s. We're just the one that helps provide the needed information they need to be able to make the right decisions and get help on its way as to the best that we can, working both with the church and civil authorities. And so this is our goal. This is how we train all of our folks. And we want to do this within that 3-hour window I talked about. Water and stake numbers. So these are real numbers of what you really need as a minimum for radio operators on a bare minimum. On a ward level, you're going to need 20 to 30. On a stake level, you're going to need a minimum of 5 to 10. And I'll show you how this works for us. But these are very, very bare minimum. We've got wards that literally have 200 and 300 operators, whether they be amateur, GMRS, or both, on ward levels. And we have stakes that have 600 to 800 easily that have been licensed. So without this minimum number, you're not going to be able to communicate a lot within your ward and boundaries without folks really having to go out of their way and get in vehicles or travel around their ward boundaries, which we want to try to avoid. Okay. So why so many? So let me give you an idea. So I'm just using this map because it's one I have from when I was in Vegas. This is the Sunrise Stake that's located right up by the temple in Las Vegas. I will give you an idea. The temple, if you're looking at the map, the temple is, let's see, where are we? Where am I? So the temple is kind of right up in this area, right up in here on this map. And this is just the ward boundaries. And then this is a ward that I have. This is my ward from a few years ago before we did a split. But this is how we split up our ward. So we break it down. We just take a map of our ward boundaries. We split it into zones, or what we call zones. You can call them areas, whatever you want. And then we call a zone captain and an assistant zone captain for each one of these zones. And as they communicate within their zone, on their weekly nets for their ward and their stakes, they will report in on those things. And this is why I'm telling you, the more people we can get within these, even with just FRS radios, people can relay through these little areas and be able to get the information they need to their zone captains, who in turn will get it to their ward, who in turn will get it to their stake. And so this is how we go about training all of our stakes and all of our wards to break up their areas and make them so they're smaller and more convenient to be able to get the communication we need throughout them. So the Spokane Council, we also use tactical call signs. I actually use these in the whole area that I cover for all of the Northwest United States. And these are wonderful because I don't know about you, but I have a hard enough time trying to remember the leadership in my own ward, much less the 900 that I cover in my mission duties. And so this helps us to not have to worry about that. And so this is a list of the tactical call signs that we use. Every one of our stakes and wards are set up with these. And we ask folks that when they check in the nets on a weekly basis, that they use these for a couple of reasons. One, so that they get used to using them. But number two, so people get used to hearing them. And so basically all it is the tactical call are these numbers right here. And you would use your stake name. So I'll give you an example. I am in the Spokane East stake. So my stake president would just say I'm Spokane East 1. He doesn't need to give me his name, doesn't need to give me his title, doesn't need to do anything. I already know who I'm talking to just by the fact that he said the Spokane East stake 1. Same in a ward. It would be the ward. My ward is Bella Vista, so it would be the Bella Vista 1. I know I'm talking to the bishop. And down through the list. These are given to everybody that's in the ward council, including the emergency communications and emergency prep specialists. You'll see them right there, have their own tactical call signs. And so I am Spokane Council, and North America West North 5 is my tactical call, and that lets everybody know that I'm the emergency communications specialist for those areas. And so this is a huge help to us, especially in nets and in some of the emergency incidents that we've had last several years. We've had major fires up here. I can tell you 3 years ago, we had a huge major one in one of our wards. They were actually in the middle of their ward net on a Sunday night, and their ward got put into a level 3 evac. Their bishop was one of the first ones to have to get out of his place. That ward net was run on a GMRS repeater, and that ward net went from a typical ward net to an emergency net, and that net ran for the next 19 days, 24/7. We had lots of operators that went up and helped with that. It was a huge deal, and eventually we ended up with Department of DNR, Department of Natural Resources, our fire folks up here, were wanting to know where all this information was coming from that different groups were getting. And so they put a call into Spokane County Emergency Management. Our emergency manager knew exactly where it was coming from and called me and said, what do we need to do to get DNR this information? I said, get them a GMRS radio. It's really easy, which they don't carry. They don't put in their headquarters or anything. So we ended up putting operators in their EOC with the GMRS radio so they could hear the traffic going on in these nets. And it worked out really well. And we were able to help a ton of people. And now I will tell you this as well. In that, we had lots of people that had horses, all kinds of livestock, all kinds of things that were under evacuation orders here in Spokane at the county fairgrounds. What they do here is that all the areas they use for the 4-H club during the fair, they actually have a group of 4-H folks and some other folks that volunteer their time to take care of people's livestock. So you can actually bring your livestock to the fairgrounds. They use all the pens and everything they use during the fair, and they will take care of your livestock and stuff for you. The problem was in this particular area, they're about an hour drive away from Spokane proper. And so what was interesting about this is we put out on our GroupMe page, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that this net was going on and have people go over to it so they can hear it going on and kind of hear what happens. And with that, we had over 200 people that volunteered their time, their trucks, their livestock trailers, all of those things to come and help people get their livestock off of their property and get them taken care of. Which if we were using phones and those kinds of things, they would have never even known it was needed. And so because it was over the radio, people were hearing it and volunteering to help out. We even had people volunteering at points once the fire kind of went away. We're helping out at roadblocks and all that kind of thing to keep away all of those wonderful people that like to go in and take advantage of folks when they're in these kinds of needs. And so it was a really awesome thing. And we had to actually bring this list with us to DNR so they would know who we're talking about when it comes to our tactical call signs. They were amazed that a church would have such an organization set up. I will tell you that stake before that fire, we averaged about 150 to 200 check-ins a week from that. That stake now currently, we get about 650 a week from that stake. It opened up a lot of minds and eyes to see what a program could do. And it was awesome to listen to the bishop during this incident actually getting and giving instructions to his ward council and other members of the church via a radio while he was evacuating his family. It was an amazing thing to listen to, and we've had it now several times, and it's worked out really well. If you have paid any attention to the stuff going on in North Carolina after Helene, same concept. A lot of people can owe their lives and their livelihoods to folks on FRS and GMRS radio. It kind of saved the day for the first couple of days. There's some cool stuff on the internet of them actually doing helicopter drops via our FRS radios. There was a couple of guys that got a repeater up really soon, drove up to the top of the highest hill they could put up a portable repeater, and that was what communications was for some of these folks for the first few days before other things could get set up. So it can be a really great tool if people know how to use it and they practiced in it. We do that. So kind of the minimum stuff that we request out of our folks. So our zone leaders and families, we would like to have them at minimum with an FRS radio and a GMRS license if we can get them to do it. The ward ECS, we need them to have minimum of a GMRS license and an amateur tech license if we can get them, and then with a mobile and a HT and a mobile base. Our stake ECS, GMRS license, amateur tech, and an HT with a mobile base. With outside antenna, the whole shoot match, and then our council ECS, GMRS license, amateur general license, HTs and mobile bases. Most of us have go boxes, all that fun stuff that go with it. But these are kind of the minimum requirements when somebody gets called to these positions of what we would like them to have. And I will tell you, for the most part, we are able to accomplish this. It's amazing how many folks we kind of say that GMRS radio is our gateway drug to amateur radio, because people can, once they can see what a GMRS license will do with the extra power, those kinds of things, especially if you've got a ward that's spread out, they really get the idea really fast. And then when they can see what we can do with amateur radio just on top of that, it gets a lot of people kind of fired up to get their amateur licenses. So we do classes and all that fun stuff. So we have a number of folks that have done that. Communication lines up and down. It's zone to zone captain to ward ECS to the priesthood and stake ECS to the priesthood and council ACS, and then council ECS is to all those that need the information, including civil authorities. We don't want all of our different folks calling everybody every 2 minutes. So we've got it broke down that this is how we want people communicating. This is how we do it on our stake nets every week and on our council net every week. So everybody reports in, and then on my council net, I'll give you some numbers here. Kevin asked me to kind of show you what we do. But when they check in on Sunday nights to my council net, we do a call for anybody that wants to check in, but our stake ECS folks are the main people that are checking into that net on Sunday nights. What gets reported? So these are the things that we report on a weekly basis. And I'll show you a spreadsheet that shows these. So we want to know how many units participated in our stake nets, how many leadership participated in all of our nets. Leadership constitutes anybody in a stake or ward council, including their counselors in like stake and relief society, young men, young women, presidencies, all those. How many total folks participated in your stake and unit nets combined? How many units held their own subnets that week? How many participated in those subnets? And then how many missionary companionships checked in? We actually have FRS radios in our missionary apartments approved by the church's mission department. And so they actually check into their ward FRS nets on a weekly basis as well. And we've got about half the mission right now that does that, which is a great help to the mission president. This happened because about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a town here called Mullen, Washington, that basically turned into the Paradise Fire in California from a few years ago. It was wiped off the planet. The whole city was burned to the ground. And we had four missionaries in that city. And before they could get on their phones to let everybody know they were being evacuated, their kind of rule, cell towers were down. They had no ability to do that. And the way missions work is missionaries report to their district leaders via phone. District leaders go to their zone leaders go to the assistants to the president, the assistants go to the mission president. So we've been able to get radios in their hands and in their apartments, and I give a list to the mission president so that he knows where every one of the stake emergency communications specialists are in the mission. So in the event that he's out of town, which he is a lot, we have no idea where he'll be in an incident. He is to go to the stake communications specialist in the stake that he's at. They will let us know where he is, and then we can report information to him on his missionaries that he can get back to Salt Lake as he needs to report them. So that's kind of how we do that. We also use phone trees, texting when available. We have GroupMe app that we use. We set up GroupMe apps for all the wards and all the stakes and the council, and we use 2 per every one of those. So one of them is a chat group. The other one is emergency only. So for folks that don't want a ton of traffic going across, they can sign up for just the emergency alerts only, and that's all they're going to get. And we ask folks to not do any kind of back and forth on the emergency unless it's absolutely part of the emergency. Take it over to the chat channel for that ward or stake or council and do it over there. And again, works out really well. We're able to get a lot of information out when those things are working. So it does help. So let me give you an idea. I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to bring up something else for you so you can kind of get an idea of what our stuff looks like. So this is the spreadsheet that I use on Sunday nights for my check-ins for the council. This is all of that stuff I just showed you a minute ago. So this number right here, this is by the week for the month of February. You can see that. So this is how many units checked into their stake nets that week. This right here is how many leadership checked into all of their ward and stake nets that week. Again, that's everybody in the ward council. This is the total number of check-ins they had for the stake that week with all of their ward and stake nets. This is how many units had their own subnet that week and how many people checked into those subnets that week. And then this is the number of missionary companionships that checked into their ward nets that week. That all equals up to some pretty fun numbers. You can get an idea. This is what we average on a weekly basis here in Spokane for total check-ins. This is our leadership. This is all of our totals. This is how many subnets we have in our units. We have 124 units here in the Spokane Coordinating Council. So you can see even with all these numbers, we only have about half of those that are participating when it comes to ward nets. So we're still working on that, but we're doing much better with it. And then we also hold GMRS nets twice a month, and we hold the simplex net once a month. just to keep people up and running on it. So that's kind of how that all works out and what it looks like. Before I stop sharing the screen, does anybody have any questions on this screen? Because I'm going to go back to my presentation. So we average about 12 to 1,300 check-ins a week on FRS GMRS. On GroupMe, I haven't checked it in a while, but I would say it's probably no more than about 100 to maybe 150. Texting is even lower than that. When we first started getting this all built up, that was the majority of our check-ins. We ask people to not do it if they don't have a radio available. We even have folks when they're out of town now.
Recording stopped.
They will check into their ward nets via GroupMe when they're even out of town, which is really nice because it keeps it in their head and helps them to remember to do it. So we also, just so people know, we ask our wards to do a weekly net. There are some bishops and leadership that want to do them like twice a month or once a month. We encourage them to do them every week. That doesn't mean everybody has to check in every week. We want them to check in a minimum of two times a month. But we want them to be held same day, same time every week. So that way, if somebody's been off of their net for a while, they're not trying to remember, oh, was it the third or fourth Sunday or Wednesday or whatever and what time? They know on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock on this frequency, their net's going to be running and somebody's already always there. I just had somebody the other night. It was kind of funny on my stake on the council net. Had a gentleman get on and he's like, I'm totally shocked and surprised. And I said, why is that? And he says, I have not been on my radio for 2.5 years. And I got back on my radio tonight and thought, well, let me check. And sure enough, the net was on 9:15 Sunday night, like it always is. So that's how we kind of encourage folks to do it. Anybody else? All right. As we hear in the radio world, nothing heard. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this real quick and get back into my presentation real fast. We're just about done, and then you guys can hit me up for all the questions you want. I just have a couple pictures for those that may not have ever seen it. This is the radio room at the church office building in downtown Salt Lake. This gentleman right over here is Elder Michael Stamford. He's the director of the ERC program for the church. So this is real stuff. It's not a bunch of people just making it up. There's 6 of these little cubicles all set up exactly the same. Antennas up on the roof of the church office building. They can pretty much operate any mode you want to talk about out of here, digital or otherwise. And then they have 2 more redundant setups of this setup in Salt Lake, one at the Welfare Square and the other one over at the main Bishop Storehouse in Ogden. So if something were to happen, they have the means of being able to get on and do their thing. And that's a view from outside of the radio room on the 27th floor of the church office building down in the Temple Square. That's where you look out when you turn around from your chair in your cubicle. So it's really nice. All right, that's all I have. I went through it really quick. I think I covered everything Kevin asked me to do, but I wanted to make sure we left plenty of time for questions and all those fun things. I'm going to leave my information up on the screen for right now. So if anybody needs email, phone number, any of that, please feel free to contact me. I'll answer as much as I can and help in any way I can. But that's all I have, Kevin, if that covers everything you were asking for.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So go ahead and unmute your mic if you have a question, and then mute it back when you finished your question. But just to clarify, we've had a few people asking if they can get a copy of the slides and the spreadsheet. So I thought I'd check with you, and if you're okay, then we'll make that available.
Yeah, I'll get it over to you, Kevin, and you can make it available to whoever you need.
Okay.
I have a question. The Rigby Stake has been on board with GMRS for about 5 years, but the stake bought the radios for just a select number of leaders, and I'm just wondering, do the members buy their own radio?
Yes. So up here, I will tell you in my own stake, so the Spokane East stake, Our stake did the same thing. It went out and bought radios for everybody. Actually, not everybody. So basically 6 positions in the ward council. So bishopric, exec sec, ward clerk, elders quorum president, relief society president. They bought radios for each one of those folks. So they are given a stake radio when they get assigned to or when they get called. Everybody else buys their own. We don't buy radios for the normal membership. Everybody buys their own. We have a lot of families that what they do is like Christmas time. That's their Christmas presents. They buy them and get them out to their kids and the rest of their family. I tell folks as well, one radio is going to do you no good. If you've been in the military, the old line is 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You have to have a minimum of 2, obviously, if you're going to communicate as a family. And even more, because like with my family, we keep them in our glove compartment. I mean, I have radios in my truck, but we keep radios in our glove compartment, all that. So when my wife is an amateur and a GMRS licensed operator, but we keep them around, and I tell families, keep them in your glove box. We have families that actually give them to their kids when they walk to school in the morning. So they'll have a radio in there. They don't give them phones. They give them radios. And so they will call on the radio when they get to school. They will call mom when they're on their way home from school. They'll do all that fun stuff. And teachers love it because they don't have a phone to play with while they're at school. So so we have some stakes that do it and some don't. I would say the majority of stakes do not purchase the equipment for their leadership.
So I've got a question. Steve, this is Steve, KB7ITU. One thing that I think it'd behoove to mention here also, and I'm sure you've run into this yourself, but especially where we're emergency communicators for the church, we need to be aware of type acceptancy for the radios and also legalities for call signs and that kind of thing, because I know that in our area that we have had a lot of operators that are operating on GMRS radios for FRS and non-licensed amateur operators and that kind of thing. And one thing that I might mention is if you are a GMRS operator and the legalities for FRS radios are that they cannot have a detachable antenna, right? So the handheld has to have an antenna that is solid on the radio. It cannot be removed. So if you're using anything but that for GMRS or for FRS, you're probably not legal. The other thing is the Baofengs are not type accepted for GMRS.
Well, I would correct you on one thing. The Radiodities and even Baofeng now makes a radio that is Part 95 compliant only. They're not an open radio, and they do have antennas on them that are non-removable.
The UV5G.
So there are, I think Radiati is a GM30, something like that. So there are radios out there that are Part 95 compliant, that are not, that are in the Chinese radio realm. So just, and so the other thing we do too is, so here's the bad thing about GMRS, is there's no license required. And so you have to help people understand, again, the legality of having a call sign and the requirements for having one. So on FRS, GMRS, anything over 2 watts, you have to have a license legally to do it, unless it's an absolute life or death emergency. So we do training classes for folks so that they know when they're using it, all of the times they have to identify all of those things. And then we go through and do classes. I just did one this last weekend where we do classes on what we call net etiquette. So how does a net work? Why are we doing what we're doing with them, and help them understand getting involved. I want to tell you real quick, and one thing that I did forget about on this is you got to realize this stuff is not just for church membership. I have people all the time try to set up their ward zones, and they want to put a little flag where all the members are in that zone. It doesn't matter. First of all, we all know how fast those things change if you've ever been a ward clerk. But more importantly, we're not there to just take care of our ward members. We're there to take care of everybody that's in the ward boundaries. Our bishops and stake presidents are responsible for everybody within the boundaries they lead. And so as you're looking at this stuff, here's the other part of that. We can get a ton of information to our civil authorities when an incident happens, instead of them having to be out in vehicles, instead of them having to drive around the communities trying to figure out what's going on. We have the ability really, really fast, if we are doing our due diligence and working with our civil authorities, whether that be areas, emergency management groups, if you've got any kind of the different groups that are out there, CERT groups, all of those things, if you're working within those, we can get a ton of information to civil authorities about what's going on in particular parts of cities, communities, because we can get the information really fast from folks that are looking out their front windows and looking at it. So all of this stuff, keep in mind, this is not just for members of the church. Yeah, so we have the zones. We have each zone. Well, let me take it back. So each ward is assigned an FRS frequency. And so the ward is has to kind of do their due diligence and figure out, each zone, because we ask each zone to do their own net. So they get a report from their zone every week that they report to their ward about. And so we have them kind of, set up the times and places and when they're going to run their net so everybody's not talking at the same time. And then when they run their ward net, then they are checking in with their ward communication specialist of how many people participated in their zone nets as well. That's where we're getting all those numbers that I showed you. Yeah, so we do a ward, one ward. Well, so we tell them to do one. We do have wards that have multiple, but for the majority of it, it's one ward net a week. And same with the zones. It's one zone net a week, whatever day they want to do that. And most don't do it on the same day that their zone or their ward net is. That's why we're running our nets, so that people learn how they run, how the net etiquette, how they run, so everybody's not talking all over each other. The other thing we do, too, is we correspond with the stake next to us so that we make sure that the wards that kind of butt up to each other on a stake level aren't on the same frequency. So we spread that around as well and have the stakes coordinate with one another as well. It's a nightmare to manage, number one, for the ward communication specialist. But even worse is if you've got outside stakes that are all using these same frequencies, which stake are you in? What are you doing? I mean, so we have found, and trust me, when I first did this, I did it the other way 20 plus years ago when I first set this up, when I first got called to do this stuff, and it was a complete nightmare. We have found that once you get them involved in a net, they understand how the net works and how they speak. And get into the net, then it helps them understand and it really cuts back on the amount of traffic that's going on. It's like everything else, that initial part of the incident is going to be super busy. But once everybody kind of gets their information in, because you got to realize, unless it's a pretty good size event, not all of these zones are going to be affected by it at times. And so the ones that aren't affected are going to go away. The ones that are minimally affected are going to go away, and you're going to be concentrating on the few that are really, being affected by it, unless it's a big emergency. But as long as people start, work on the nets and check in on a regular basis, they get the idea and it works out really well. If they've got a license and the ward runs a GMRS, so if the ward is small enough, a lot of our wards don't run a GMRS net. It's all simplex. People learn how to relay through the ward. If it's a bigger, more spread out ward, then they will run a GMRS net. This kind of depends on how the ward is set up and how the ward emergency communication specialist wants to do it. They're different toned. So tones are different on them, and they're spread around. So again, I told you 21 for the coordinating council. So that covers all the way, down to Grangeville and, south. So it's not all 21 of them sitting right here in Spokane.
Dave, there's a question about CTCSS tones. A lot of people will buy, or at least we found this, will buy just pretty much any radio, and our CERT team did the same thing. And 80% of the radios didn't allow traffic on it. I mean, you was just filtering out because of the tones. So that's part of your net, just, making sure you all have the same tones, because some of them come just paired to the radios that you buy together. And, they don't do that. But that's like a first thing, make sure everybody's on the same tone if you're going to, keep them programmed 1 through 22.
No tones.
Yeah. We don't use tones. It's just one more thing people have to try to remember. And so we don't use them at all. We do for the repeaters. We don't have any choice. We have to for those. But for the normal simplex stuff, we don't use tones.
And that's why I was just bringing it up, is that you'll want to have those cleared, because almost all the radios have it programmed that way. And it's like, why can't I talk to them? It's like the number one question.
Yeah, and then and that's why I said make sure too when you buy these things that you can use them on repeaters, because there's a lot of them you can't.
So one of the issues that we have with not using tones is the fact that we have other people from outside of the area that's talking right over top of us, and you get all the kids out there playing with their bubble pack radios, and you get bleep 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 every time you turn around. But another thing that you need to realize too is even if you're running tone, right?
You're just walking on people. Oh, sorry.
No. If you're using tone and the person transmitting in your group keys the radio and opens your tone, it's going to open it up for everything else to come in anyway. You're going to hear everything else, all the other stations coming in. Once your radio is activated, you'll still hear everything, unless and then once it's released, of course, and goes back quiet, then it blocks everybody else out. But when you key that radio with a subaudible tone and activate everybody else's radio, they're going to hear everything around them.
I will make a comment on that as well. So yes, you're correct. You're going to hear it. The other thing that we have found is if you get on the radio and you just simply ask, just like we do in amateur radio when we start a net, we're running some emergency communication stuff right at the moment. Can you please stay off the frequency for the next 5 or 10 minutes and let us do our thing? The vast majority, including kids, will get off of the frequency and stay off of it. Yes, you're always going to have, just like we do in amateur radio, you got the idiot that won't do it and wants to be a pain. And guess what that is, though? That's training, because that's going to happen in an emergency. And so it helps your people learn how to deal with that when you're on a weekly net. And so we use them as training opportunities as well.
It would seem like in an emergency, you'd have a lot more problem with people trying to communicate outside of your organization, and that could be a major problem. This is all organized assuming that you basically have control of the FRS or GMRS frequencies, but it seems like in an emergency, a widespread emergency, you're going to have, everybody and their dog has an FRS radio, and if they start trying to communicate with their family and communicate with everyone else, it seems like it's going to be a real problem to your organization.
Well, I can tell you in the 5 major events we've used this system. Yes, we have it. And again, if you think amateur radio is going to be any different in a big emergency, if you've not been in one, it's the same thing. You've got all kinds of people who aren't used to dealing with nets and don't really care what else is going on, because theirs is the most important thing. You can get around it, and you can bring them into your net and help them understand that, if everybody's on this net and it's organized, and they will understand really fast as they watch it, that it'll help them communicate a lot better with their people as well as us communicating with ours. So it's just working with people. And again, if you're doing it weekly, people are hearing it. They know there's something going on there. And the other part is you'd be amazed how many people don't use these in an emergency. Their kids are playing with them. They're doing all that stuff that you hear, just normal stuff. But in an emergency, it's funny how many people forget they even have them aren't used to using them.
Another thing you need to remember about having tones turned on, and like your speaker's talking about, that in an emergency, these people are going to start crying for help. Well, if you are on a tone, you can't help them because you aren't going to hear them. But they're going to hear all these people talking to each other, trying to help people, and they're saying, hey, I need help, but nobody's hearing them. That's because your system is on a tone, which you shouldn't be. You should be opened up so that you hear everything on that channel. Otherwise, somebody else also said a minute ago that the minute you start to transmit, you think it's a clear channel because you have your tone turned on, but it's not. You're actually going to be stepping on somebody else's communication. So tones are a no-go anytime.
Yep. You don't want to do them, but again, it all comes down to how often are you running nets? How many people do you have participating in them? And we have it all the time. When I run my nets, my GMRS nets, because keep in mind, GMRS are just shared FRS frequencies. And so I'll have people that'll try and get into my net that are on just a normal FRS radio going, what the heck is this? What's going on? And they're not in the, so you can only hear them on simplex. But I'll get over on simplex and talk to them and tell them what's going on and tell them it's a community thing. And if they want to participate, we'd be more than happy to help them know what they need to do that. And I'll tell you, people are open to it. They understand really quick in an emergency but yeah, just leave the tones completely out because it's just another thing everybody has to try to remember anyway. So don't even worry about it. And yes, it's going to be confusing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not confusing. But if you have good people that are good operators and people that are good net control operators, and we train them and we switch them around, that you will learn how to deal with it. And the folks that are on the net will learn how to deal with it. And it just like you do on amateur radio.
That's good to know, but you have experience and have made it work.
Hold on. We've got a pile up. We've got 4 people that are trying to get in. So
I was just going to say that's really comforting. That's always been something that's worried me. And it's comforting to know that you've had experience in actual emergencies and have been able to work through that and make it effective.
Yeah, like I said, at the beginning of it, it's always chaos, but that, I don't care what net you're on. But once kind of people settle down and, the emotion gets out of it and people, start to calm down a little bit, it works out really, really. That one we did for 20 days straight, 24 hours a day. I'll tell you what, at the beginning of that, it was not pretty, but we were able to get it under control and get people understood what's going on. I mean, I even had people go to different frequencies so I could help them explain to them what was going on and what they needed to do so we weren't affecting the net. And so you can do training and all that fun stuff too. So yeah, you just do whatever you got to do to make it work, but it will work. So training. I mean, I'm going to, so give you an example. I'm going to award this Sunday and going to do a class, an award on getting their award set up. And so all you can do, I'll do a class for one person. I don't care. But I will tell you, do not do your nets on a quarterly basis. I'll tell you right now, when it comes to really needing to use it, you're not going to be ready. And that's why I said, do them every week. It doesn't mean everybody has to check in every week, but you need to do them on a very regular basis, once a week at minimum. And so that everybody knows that it's always there on Tuesday night at 7:00, no matter what. And I will tell you, and word of mouth is huge. I mean, I've got people now, it's so hilarious to me. I'll have people come up to me and go, so Dave, I was just talking to my cousin who's in Salt Lake and they've never heard of this. And I'm like, well, too bad for them. And they're like, well, they want to know how to get something set up in their ward. Well, tell them to call me. I'll be more than happy to help them out. So word of mouth is a huge part. And the church is really funny. When one ward's doing something and the other ward's not, somebody wants to know why that ward's doing something and we're not. And yeah, we have people up here so right now I've got 14 stakes in the Spokane Coordinating Council. Only 10 participate in this program. We have 4 wards that do nothing. We have one, the stake president's so dang hostile. He actually sent a cease and desist, actual legal cease and desist letter to one of the ward communication specialists that was called by a bishop to run a ward communication deal in their ward in his stake. And he called me up and he's like, what do I do with this? I said, you take a copy of that to your bishop. That's who called you. You ask him what he would like you to do. Does he want you to keep going? Does he want you to stop? If he tells you to keep going, that's who called you, not your stake president. I said, now it becomes a problem with your stake president, your bishop, and they can work it out. But so we have some that see no point in this. Cell phones are going to save their lives. They've never had a reason to doubt that. And so it is what it is. But the nice thing is we have enough operators now that if one of those stakes were in a position where they needed help, we've got plenty of operators we can call on, and we can get people over to those areas and help as best we can. And so you're going to have people who just flat out won't do it, and that's fine. That's up to them. But I will tell you the vast majority of people, even on a ward basis, I've got people in wards that their bishop and in stakes that their stake president will not participate in this. They check into my net every week because they want to be able to participate with something.
Hey, Dave, we've got a couple of questions from the chat, and then we have a couple of hands up.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
What's that?
Go ahead.
So the first question from chat is, how do you know that the radios you buy will work with each other?
So if you're buying an FRS radio that's already set up, it automatically will. Those are programmed when you buy them with the 22 FRS GMRS channels in them. Like the brother said earlier, you may need to check them to make sure the tones are up, but it'll be in the instructions of how to do that and just turn them off. If you're buying one of the Chinese radios, so the Baofangs, Wushans, Radiodity, all of those kind, you will have to program them. They won't have anything in them when you get them. And so they will have to be programmed with the FRS and GMRS frequencies in them. But if you buy one right off the shelf in the bubble packs, they're already there. Don't have to do anything with them.
Okay, on that, Kevin, the Baofeng UV5Gs come pre-programmed because they are a GMRS Type 95 accepted radio.
So do me a favor. Let's not talk about radios. That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay, but
they are
automatically programmed.
Understood. Let's not talk about all the different radios because there's too many.
Yeah, it's a big discussion. Okay, next question. Are we supposed to wait for a ward calling, or can we get a system set up and just let the bishop know we can help?
Okay, so I can't take my name tag off. So I will give you the good answer. You need to be called. Do not start a stake or a ward communications system without your priesthood behind you. Now, when I say that, like I said earlier, there are people in wards and stakes that do not participate that will participate in the ward next to them or the stake next to them or whatever it is. You can set up a communications program with your family anytime you want. You can set it up with neighbors anytime you want. The thing I would tell you is you don't dare call it a whatever your ward or whatever your stake name is. So like in my case, if I have not been called by my bishop, I am not going to do anything with my family or my neighbors or anybody and call it a Bella Vista ward net. You do not have permission from your priesthood authority to do that. So do not do that. I would tell you to go to your bishop and say, hey, bishop, if the Lord feels so inspired, or you feel so inspired as to allow me to do this, I am more than willing to do it. That is not going to your bishop and say, hey, this calling is the one I'm supposed to have, which we don't aspire to callings, but letting your leadership know that you're more than willing to help out with this stuff. Just like I had a brother years ago when I was in Vegas. He had gotten back into church, been inactive for years, and loved Cub Scouts. And he came up to me one Sunday and he said, would there be any problem if I went and told the bishopric that I'd be more than willing to be the Cub Master in our ward? I said, no. In fact, they'll love you. You're not asking to be, you're letting them know you are available and willing to do it. And if you do that, I tell you, I know a ton of bishops and stake presidents said, well, let's get you in. So you can do that, but do not call it your ward or stake net if you have not been called to the position.
And we have a hand raised by Winter Wolf. You want to go ahead?
Thanks. So here within our ward and the stake ECS, so my ECS operator has made me block leader, and then I've pushed out radios to everybody into my block. I got research radios. They all bought them. Some of them bought multiple. Blah blah blah. question is, and I think you kind of answered this, but I want to see if that's how you got it. How do you get them to participate fairly regularly? Because I was doing the twice a month thing, and I have 2 to 4 people that would check in consistently. So is it going to that every week? Does that seem to help kind of keep everybody a little more on track on checking in more frequently?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. And
Because
I'll tell you one other one since you brought it up. I will also tell you this. Don't get frustrated by this stuff. Okay? Let me give you a great example. I have a ward emergency communications specialist. He is called. Okay? He gets, I mean, literally no support from his ward. None of his leadership, nobody. This brother has run a net every Sunday night at 6:30 religiously for 5 years, and he is the only person that checks into that net, except for those of us that know he's there and check in as visitors. But he is there every week, and he's been doing it now for 5 years with never in 5 years having anybody in his ward check into that net.
All right. Well, that because when you were talking about that, doing it on more of a weekly basis and not forgetting, and I think that really kind of hit home with me just trying to get just my block, not the whole ward, just my block. And everybody wanted to be a participate, and everybody got, I went out, I said, I researched the radio, I said, I'll program them, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's going to cost you like $10 because buy them off of Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Like the 10 pack was cheaper kind of thing.
Yep.
Everybody bought multiple radios, but just getting that consistency of everybody checking in on
and send out reminders too. Send out,
and I did.
You know what? Create a
group meals, between group me and sending out emails. I'd send them out the day before. And I got this from Steve because he does this to us to make sure that we don't forget. I sent out group meetings and I was sending out emails, and then finally I just kind of gave up towards the end of the, when winter started hitting. I'm just like, I don't know. And this has actually been good because I've actually had a couple of them that were the one that were kind of checking in frequently saying, are we still doing that? Are we going to do that again? I'm like, well, I'm kind of vacillating. I would like it to be something we need to test those radios.
You know what? I will tell you too.
Keep those
when
radios.
that list I gave you guys of all the 6 things that people report to me on a weekly basis. I'll tell you what, do more than just have somebody check in. Give them an assignment. I mean, even I've done stuff, literally, we'll do stuff where we'll say, okay, tonight we want you to walk 4 doors down from your house or however you got to do it and tell us, do they have a flag up at their house? What color is their front door?
Reminder.
Give them an assignment to report in your net. I don't care what it is. How many people are in your home tonight? Any of that kind of stuff.
More interactive and more interesting for them.
Make it more than just getting on a radio and go, hi, I'm there. I mean, that's boring as all get out. So do something that you can have them actually report something. And I'll tell you, between that and doing them consistently, you'll get much more people playing.
Okay, I'll probably try to get back on that starting next in March then. And
don't give up. Don't give up. Just keep going.
All right, thank you.
It's the major feed the horses. We got to feed the horses whether they want to be fed or not.
So one more question for you, Dave. How do you train non-amateur radio operators how to operate, including how to operate on radio nets?
The same way I do amateur operators. If you realize, I know there's a ton of amateur operators on this thing. So when you take your tech license, how much of your tech license actually tells you how to operate a radio? Very, very little. And so I used to do a class when I first got my license 20 plus years ago. I said, you know what? We got to do something. So I used to do a class, it was titled, okay, you got your license, now what? And I would go, that class was how you operate a radio. I mean, literally how you push the talk, programming a radio, what tones are, what antennas, why do we use all these different antennas, different coax, all that stuff. I do the exact same thing for GMRS operators because guess what? If they're going to get a GMRS license and now they can operate a mobile base with an outside antenna, They need to know about coax and antennas and power and all of that same stuff an amateur operator does. And so I do the same class. I just do it specifically to GMRS folks. So so we don't have any repeaters that are specifically set aside for leadership. They participate just like everybody else. And all of the repeaters are just done by individuals, just like every amateur repeater. Let me take that back. We do now, as of 2 years ago, we do actually have an Inland Northwest GMRS radio club that is here in Spokane that got started up. And they've got 2 repeaters that their club has, but all the rest of them are just by individuals. Like me, I have 3 of them here in Spokane, in the Spokane Coeur d'Alene area. Mine's been up here in Spokane for 9 years. I still have repeaters that are down in Vegas that are still running. I mean, they're commercial radio. They're a commercial repeater. I mean, mine's on battery backup, as well as the site that I have has got commercial power to it. But if commercial power goes down, then mine are on solar backup with batteries. It'll run for 10 days with no power. The site that I'm on will never go 10 days because the other things that are on that site are required to have power. And it's one of the first places that they set up because one of those sites is the sheriff's office site. So they're one of the top priority for getting power back on that mountain. But even if it did, my repeater will run for 10 days with no power to it. Just like amateur repeaters, same thing.
That is a problem. There's no coordination for it, really. And that is a big problem.
Nope, there isn't. But if you talk to people, it's kind of funny because here I didn't even know this until last year. I'm known in the GMRS community here in Spokane. I am the godfather of GMRS radio in Spokane because I was the first guy to put one up. And so I would assume that it's the same with you guys. GMRS is all of a sudden a big deal. And lots of people are doing it. And so we went through this little thing about 3 years ago where we had like 400 people decide they want to put up GMRS repeaters because everybody thinks they need to have their own. And it's the same in the amateur world. But what's interesting is that's all dropped. At one point, we had almost 50 repeaters up. And that has now backed back off. People have dropped their repeaters out and have just started using what's here because, one, they don't want to deal. Most people will put them up at their house, which isn't going to get a lot of range out of them. If you're going to have a repeater, find a decent site for it so you can actually use it as a repeater, not just a really strong base radio. And so a lot of people started putting them up, and then they went, wait a minute, they weren't being used. All that you have your onesie twosies that want to try and do a closed system, so you can't use it. The simple fact is, it's just like amateur radio. You don't own the frequency. You may own the equipment that the frequency is running on, but you don't own the frequency. And at the end of the day, the only way to keep somebody off of a repeater is to turn it off. There's a limited number of tones, and a lot of radios anymore. I can hit my radio and it'll tell me what the tone is. I don't even have to go look for it. So we had the little thing where a lot of people did it, and we are now, when somebody wants to put one up, we have a Facebook page for the Inland Northwest GMRS group. They'll put a request on the page and say, hey, I'm thinking about putting a repeater over here. And people are starting to be able to self-coordinate as opposed to what we do in amateur radio where we have an actual coordinator. So it's working out pretty well.
Hi, this is Paul. I have 2 questions. Number 1, you have lots and lots of net control stations, so you must be doing a lot of training with that. How do you get those people to step up to the plate? How do you get them trained? And the second thing is, when I'm net control station, I use printed forms that I created myself so that I know where to write, and I can be quick, and I can be accurate, and I have my records. Do you guys use any sort of printed forms for your net control stations?
Yeah, everybody does. I do mine off of spreadsheets, and then I print them out so I have a hard copy of them. But mine, when I'm on a net, I'm running off a spreadsheet for all my check-ins. I didn't show you, but here, let me do this. I'll show you the rest of my spreadsheet. I only showed you one part of it. Let me show you mine. So This is the one that's just my report page. Okay. If you come down here to the tabs. So this is my one that's my weekly, come on, you can do it. This is my one that's weekly check-in by stake. So when I get to that part of my net where I'm doing weekly check-ins, this is our Simplex Net one, same thing. It's all done by stake. Our GMRS one, all done by stake. And then I do a monthly deal on every ward. So this is monthly for the whole year. And then this is my years going back. So I'll take you back. Hold on, let me get to this one. I'll show you. See, the guys don't think I'm fibbing you. Actually, maybe I won't because I can't. Got something blocking my deal here. Let me see if I can get this out of the way. Give me a second here. Yeah, there we go. So this is by stake for the years. And then this is my summary. So here, I'll take you back to where I began so you don't think I'm actually kidding you. So this was the first year I kept this. That was my average right there. 150 a week.
Wow.
And we've grown from that to 2,000 a week. So I'm just telling you, be persistent, do a lot of training, and it's a program of the church, guys and gals. It'll come. It'll take a little bit, and you got to work your tail off, but it'll come. And as you get people more and more excited about it and using it, it just kind of grows all by itself.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. Thank you for doing this.
Oh,
Can
no
you-
problem.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing it because I don't think you guys need to see that. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, the map that you showed of the ward showing the zones, how many average, or how many families on average did you have in each zone?
So the way we set ours up, like in a city like where I am in Spokane, and obviously this is a little bit harder when you're rural, but what we basically tell people is don't make them any more than about 3 or 4 blocks. The idea is if you don't have a lot of people in that zone on radio, then you're going to have to go look at your zone and see what the condition is. And so if you can just go down the end of your street, walk a block either direction, or a couple of blocks either direction, and get a quick, so you can do a quick check-in. If you got lots of people on radios, it's no problem. You never have to leave your house. So we try to keep them as small so they're very, and again, you want them small because you're using FRS radio, so you don't want to have to cover a huge area for these zones. So you want to keep them as small as you can. In rural areas, what we've done is you typically, even in a rural area, you'll tend to have these little clumps of homes, out in the country and stuff. They're not right next to each other, but you tend to have these little clumps. And so what we've done is we've asked them to run FRS for the little clump and have one guy that at minimum, one guy that has a mobile base, and then he can report into the ward ECS.
So you basically, all your net control operators have an external antenna.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to be a net control operator, you have to have a mobile base and external antenna.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
You bet.
There's one question from the comments. Does training people and involving them in ward and stake emergency networks make families more willing to share their emergency resources?
Yes, absolutely. We've noticed that too. Yep.
Dave?
Yes.
Darian Van Gorkum here from the West Richland Stake. We've had our GMRS repeater
Here's trouble.
We've had our repeater about a year, up at about 2,050 feet. We've had great success with it. Yep. So much so that I've got a lot of people all over getting on it. And there's a lot of repeaters now I'm seeing popping up. I mean, almost all the repeater channels are taken. So I went ahead and registered my repeater with mygmrsrepeater.com.
Yep.
And that way I kind of know that, well, I've established this is kind of where my repeater is.
Yeah. And that helps too.
Yep. I'm hoping by doing that, I'm not going to have somebody pop up and say, well, I've had my repeater here longer than you. You need to move your repeater somewhere else. And what do you think about that?
So I registered. So for those that don't know, there's a site called mygmrs.com. A lot of GMRS operators and repeater owners register their repeaters on that site. So you can actually go on that site and put in the state and city you want to see where GMRS repeaters are, and it'll give you all of the repeaters that have been registered for that area with their tones and everything for the most part. And that helps coordinate stuff a little bit. So I would tell you, if you haven't had somebody tell you in a year that you're stepping on them, you're probably pretty good. So since Richland's here, I didn't realize you guys were here. So let me give you an idea of Richland, Washington. So they're kind of south of me. There's what we call the Tri-Cities down there. And I was just down there last summer and did some training for them in some multiple emergency preparedness fairs. Actually, I got my invite for next year already, for this year for June. But when I went down there, they were pretty much as stakes. They weren't doing a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot going on at all. So we were able to set up a training meeting for every stake down there at one time when I was down there for an emergency preparedness fair. We did the fair, and then I did an actual training on how the stakes and wards can get their program started. And we were able to do that all at one time. And they are going nuts now. There are stakes. They just did their very first exercise here just a month or so ago as a group, and they're taking off like wildfire. So I'll tell you, it's just, like I told you, I will train one person. I'll train 1,000. I don't care. The more you do it, the more people get involved in it. Be excited about it. Don't just go in and be Mr. Monotone. I've got a whole presentation on why we do this. So I've got different slides from different presidents of the church that have given counsel on doing this kind of stuff. And so I just do it, and I just train, and I'll go anywhere. I don't care. Typically, if I have to go out of town, I'll call a member and say, hey, can I steal your couch for a night? So I don't have to pay for a hotel and not have to drive all the way down and all the way back. I mean, I go all the way over to the west side of Washington and train. I've gone down into almost all the way down through Medford, Oregon, which is almost California border, which is an 11-hour, 12-hour drive for me. But I will go and I will train. I'll do it on Zoom. I don't care. I'll do it just about anywhere. I will tell you one thing I've done that's kind of helped people understand their cell phone is not going to save their lives. You know, because we all know this little guy right here is going to save everybody, right? It's always going to work. It's always going to be there for us. And I, for years and years and years and years and years, struggled. How do I get people to understand that is not the savior they think it is? And so I guess it was right before COVID, I was doing a training. I had 4 stakes. It was emergency preparedness fair. And I got asked to come in and train 4 stakes here in Spokane. 4 wards in 1 stake, And so I went in, and as I was in that meeting, again, I was thinking, how can I get it into their brain? And I've got the most wonderful piece of revelation, one of those ones I can call my top 3 since I've been doing this for 25 years, on how to do it. And it has worked wonderful. I use it all the time now. So what I do when I go into a training meeting for getting wards or stakes involved is I will find out who is the highest ranking person in that room, whether it be Relief Society president, bishop, stake president, whatever it is. And I will get their cell phone number, and I'll write it up on the board in front, and I will tell everybody, put this phone number in your texting app and don't do anything until I tell you to. And when I tell you to, you just send a text that says help, hello, hi, just short, sweet. And you keep sending that message until I tell you to stop. Because what's going to happen in an emergency? They're just going to keep doing it. And so I time it for 30 seconds. So I did a stake present here just a few months ago in a training I did. We had 60 people in the room, and they started texting. I have them turn up their phone volume and put it on the table on vibrate so everybody can hear it. And so that thing starts blowing up. And in 30 seconds, with 60 people in the room, that first counselor in the stake presidency got 730 texts. You explain to me how anybody is going to take care of that kind of traffic on a phone. His wife was sitting next to him and said, "You and I are having a conversation when we get home." Because she saw it really fast. That is only a third of his stake doing it. There are that number of messages. And so when you talk to people about the fact that a radio, the beautiful thing about radio, I don't care if it's GMRS, amateur, what it is, you are a giant conference room. Everybody's getting the same information at the same time from the same person with the same amount of everything behind it. And so you are able to help a ton of people. I tell people all the time, I don't care if you don't talk on the radio. The amount of information you can pick up just listening to nets in an emergency is amazing. Not only that, as you participate more and more on nets, you get to listen to voices. How many amateur operators have ever gone somewhere and go, "Oh, you're the face to that voice I hear on the net every week"? It's always fun to put that voice and that name together. Well, guess what? It's the same thing if you're just on a net. That voice, if it's familiar to you in an emergency, guess what that does to you? It calms you down. You know that person. So it's a calming effect on them. And I'll tell you what, that piece of revelation I got for how to help people understand that phone's not going to save you, I'll tell you what, I've used that thing all over the place in the last 3 years, and it really wakes people up in a hurry.
Hey, Dave?
Yes.
Little example, we had that emergency simulation you mentioned about a month ago.
Yep.
We had, within 2 hours, most of our stakes, 63% of the members in our stake were contacted in person, and that information was communicated via radio to ward leadership, ward communication specialist, stake communication specialist, and the stake high council and the stake presidency. We figured about 1,800 people were contacted, their status confirmed, and that radio communication all within 2 hours to the stake president.
Yep. It's amazing.
That cannot be done. That cannot be done by phone.
Yep. I agree. Yep.
David, can I throw this out there? So kind of talking what you're saying with a group of 10 and just my blog, that was one of the things that I told them. I'm like, look, you're all going to be listening. And if there's an emergency that I got to go up to Steve to send it up the channel, but there may be some critical, but not necessarily non-emergency, you can go help. You can say, hey, I got so-and-so taken care of. I'm taking them blankets or whatever it is. You know, like you said, it's that kind of group conference chat, and then everybody's able to help each other. So that like if I got to go out to Steve KB7 ITU to send more higher emergency, it's got to go further up the chain. It just makes it work so much faster, I think.
Oh, I agree. Well, and again, it makes people aware of that there are needs. If you're on a phone, because again, if they're on a, you know, and imagine this. So what's going to happen in a real incident in your ward? Who's getting the first phone call? Come on. Who's getting it?
Probably the bishop or
the bishop. The bishop. And then who's going to, when he doesn't answer, who's getting the next one?
First counselor.
Second counselor, elders quorum president, relief society. They're going to go right down the leadership. And guess what they're going to get? The same thing, because you can't do it. Even if you're on GroupMe, the same thing happens. I mean, if you guys have ever seen when Kevin does your GroupMe things, how many people are all, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. I mean, you're going to try and you can't manage that. And so the beautiful thing about radio is, and they're sending that text to the bishop, not to a group of people. So nobody even knows that they need the help. You're doing it on radio. People know you need the help. And if they've got the extra stuff, you guys all know how it works. People are good. The vast majority of people are very good-hearted people and want to try and do what they can do. And they will do it. But if they don't know that there's a need, kind of like what happened in that fire with the folks that donated their livestock trailers and stuff, if they'd have been on a phone, nobody even known they needed that. And so with the fact that they were on radio and that was out there that they needed the help, then people were more than willing to come out and help. So it helps in a lot of different ways.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
One other thing that I might mention, and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because it may have changed since I checked on it, but in an emergency situation, another thing that's against cell phones is that if FEMA deems fit that they need to use the communications network that the cell phones are on, they can actually shut out the users and FEMA can use it all by themselves.
Well, they'll do that for a lot of different reasons. If
Right,
they
right.
expect terrorists or something involved, they're going to kill it real fast because you can do a lot of stuff with a cell phone nowadays.
Right.
So there's all kinds of. But even if they don't, I mean, what's the thing people use their phones for in an emergency now?
Family.
No,
Taking videos of their
taking
cats.
videos and pictures so they can be the first ones to post it on social media, and that just kills bandwidth. And so you just end up just destroying the network. I'll give you another one. This has got nothing to do with this presentation, but it's here now, so I'm going to bring it up. How many of you know what an out of area contact is for your family for emergency? If you don't know what it is, in my particular case, I'll give you mine. So my out of my area contact is my sister in Las Vegas. So if something happens here, I call my sister in Las Vegas, and all my family call her, not me. That way they can get the updates from her. I'm not bogging down the cell services here in Spokane trying to get all those calls and text and all that stuff. I send it out to her, and our family is set up where other sisters call whoever. So do out of area contacts too, so you can do your part to help not take out the network. I mean, it's not going to be usable anyway, but at least do your part to try and help out. And it helps your family because that way you're not getting 500 phone calls when you're trying to do stuff, evacuate your family or whatever it is. You just send your updates to one person and the rest of your family calls them. Same concept. I'm the same way. So that same sister, she's not an amateur operator, but I know a guy with HF 4 houses down from her that I can contact anytime I need to. So use these things use the tools that our Heavenly Father's been more than gracious to allow us to have. So, but phones are not the answer, folks. And the more you can help people understand that, the faster they will get over to radio, I'll tell you. And like I said, we use FRS and GMRS as our gateway drug. You get people on FRS and they start to see, wait a minute, this works. And you go, well, do you want to do more? Well, yeah. Well, then you need to get your GMRS license. And with that, then you can this and this and this. I mean, just a handheld radio, guys, you all know it. Handheld radio on an outside antenna does a whole lot for that radio if you got a license. Yeah. You don't even need a mobile base.
Dave?
So there's all kinds of stuff you can do. But once people kind of get the bug, it's like everything else. And guys, GMRS is cheap.
Oh, yeah.
It is. It is just in the rate. I will tell you, 25 years ago when I did this the first time I ever did this, I went to a meeting. The way I got called in this is I was the emergency preparedness guy, brand new on the High Council. My stake president calls me up 2 weeks after I got called and said, hey, we got a meeting with our Area 70 at the Bishop Storehouse this Saturday for something. They want all you here. I'm like, great. So we go there and they're like, hey, we're going to set up this communication thing with GMRS. So you need to go buy this radio. 25 years ago, that was an ICOM, 16 channels, $140. No keypad. You had to do all the tones with stupid little buttons on the side of it. Beep, 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 so many times. And it took me 2 weeks to figure out how to program 2 radios, $140 a pop. The GMRS license was $75 for 10 years back then. And they said, you got to go do this. This is the radio. They got AES, remember Amateur Electronics Supply. We had one in Vegas at the time. They went down there and said, hey, we need these GMRS radios. And they're like, we don't do GMRS. We're amateur folks. Our Area 70, you ready for this? Our Area 70 gave them his credit card and said, if you'll bring in 200 of these radios at $140 a pop, I guarantee they'll be sold in 30 days. And if they're not, put the rest of them on this credit card. Our Area 70 did that. So I get done with this meeting on Saturday. My stake president says, oh, by the way, you're also now the emergency communications guy for our state. Go get these radios. Because we started a net 2 weeks later, the Area 70 did. And we were ready to go. And compared to that, nowadays you can get radios. We didn't have online. We didn't have any of that stuff. The way you can get radios so easy now and so cheap and get on board with this stuff so fast that if you just help people understand why and how, the majority of people will do it. I tell you. But it's just training. Get out there and be part of your wards and stakes, and it'll come.
Dave?
Yep.
I think one of the best things we found with our simulation we had a month ago was we made sure the ward council had radios.
Yep.
So not only what we did is we hid 3 families in each ward that had an emergency happen to them. We assigned them their emergency. Then the ward had to go find them. And then they had to report to the ward communication specialist. And at the same time, they reported to the ward council. And what was incredible was that the ward council finally got it. They saw how it worked. And we had several members with radios, and they were trying to coordinate care relief, and they found 4 additional people in the ward that had trackers that no one knew, and people that had trailers and people that had chainsaws. And so all of a sudden, all these members said, I've got that. I can go coordinate.
And we're willing to let people use them.
Yeah. So it's like they saw that, hey, all of a sudden the whole ward, they had the radios, could coordinate this care. And within, actually, our ward had 98% contacted the entire ward, and within 45 minutes had the 3 members contacted and relief all organized, ready to go, and all kinds of new resources found out because ward members were on these radios interjecting in that they have these resources to help. But the biggest thing was the ward leadership got it. They finally saw, hey, this is really cool. So
the light bulb came on.
The light bulb went on, and the next one will be even better. We'll have more people. It's catching on like wildfire that way. But I would. You got to get your ward communications supposed to talk to your bishopric and get them on board if you can, and then hold a simulation so they can see how it works.
Yep, I agree.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate all of the participation we've had this evening. We've had people calling in from actually all around the country. I'm noticing all kinds of people that I hadn't even realized were on the call. We've got lots from Utah and some great people on the call that have kind of joined us tonight. But Elder Carleton, we really appreciate you providing this tonight. It's been I think a great thing for everybody involved. And I can tell by all the comments and the messages that have been coming into me directly that you've got everybody all excited and they're all fired up to figure out how to use GMRS more effectively here. So thank you so much.
It's a wonderful tool. I will tell you that. So
okay.
I hope it was worth everybody's time. So
yeah, I know it is. It has been great. So again, thanks everybody. And let's see, Steve Taylor, can you get your mic to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Can. So, yeah, would you mind giving us a closing prayer, Steve?
I will.
Thank you.
Our Father in heaven, as we come before thee at the close of this training session, we're indeed grateful for the evening that we've had and Elder Carlson's wisdom and experience that he's been able to share with us. We ask for thy Spirit to be with us this evening, that we might be able to recall these things and be able to remember them when it comes time to put them into service. And we ask that we might be able to help to inspire those who indeed have been called, and those people that feeling that they need to be involved, that they might be able to be inspired and get involved. And we ask for blessing on those that are traveling or working this evening, that they'll be watched over and guided and protected. And again, we thank thee for Dave's experience, and we ask for these favors and blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.